Welcome to the Hunter's Moon Full Moon Stories. We're going to start today with something, research, and a story that I had written from Louisiana. It's the legend of the Attakapas Canal. It happened in the 1750s in the territorial French Louisiana. The British had been fighting the French up in Canada. The British made the Acadians a promise to be neutral, but all of them were not over the war, and so an English governor took the opportunity to ship all the Acadians from their lands, and it was called the Great Derangement. Now the story is from two sides here. The Acadians who sought help, because as they arrived in Louisiana, they were given lands to go and settle and farm. But these lands were unexplored lands. Come down a canal called Bayou Lafourche from the Mississippi River to Dawsonville. So they found a Napoleon soldier, two brothers that had traveled from France and had moved into the area and were willing to help the Acadians, who were farmers, to run some native people, the Attakapas, out of the area they wanted to settle. Now, the Attakapas Indians were not related to the Chippewa, the Cherokee, the Homas tribe, or any of the other tribes you find in the state of Louisiana today, or any other more northern tribes that were loyal to the British or French, or even the pirates of the salt marshes. They were not friends with any other tribes either. They lived on a lake called Verret. Called Lake Verret. Has the name lake in it. At the end of the canal that came from Bayou Lafourche, as it was named Lafourche Bayou at the time. They turned it around. So the Acadians arrived in Louisiana. They were going to help colonize this territory. So land was given, each family coming off the ships. These new peoples were filling up what had been settled, and because of the people who knew how to just live off the land and the richness of the Atchafalaya swamp, they soon discovered the Attakapas Indians about 15 miles down the canal from Bayou Lafourche. Big steamships could not go down this little bayou. It was too small. They had to go in smaller boats down there to get to Lake Verret. The Attakapas Indians were feared by the other tribes because they ate their enemies. They were indeed man-eaters, cannibals. They had lived so long at Lake Verret that they had lived on shell mounds made from the shells of the mussels they left on the ground. They found they could build the swamp up with these mounds and not have issues with the flooding that happened when you lived on what little land you found around the lake. When a hunt for a deer or battle with another tribe was to happen because of the dangers of either, they would paint their legs black and wear deerskin cape with the long feathers found on the egret, decorating it and dance and get worked up for at dawn was to bring them. The egret legs were black, so the fish would not see them. So this is what they felt, is that they painted their legs black, that their enemies would not see them. The dangers of the swamps were great regardless if it was a hunt or if it's a battle. Great gators lived there long than the dugouts that they traveled the lake and canals with to fish. They didn't have dogs back then. Dogs was kind of a creature that came from Europe. And they had coyotes. And the Attakapas would follow a female coyote to her den and steal the puppies and tame them and make them their hunting dogs. This whole thing from the Attakapaw Indians was really scary for the Catholic Acadians to want to fight these man-eaters. They were scared. But there were more stories told at night about other creatures of the night down where they lived. And this made it even scarier. The first run-in with the Attakapaw Indians were fur traders. No native people that they've ever come across caused the great sickness that these fur traders brought. And at the time, it was short on food because they couldn't hunt. They were sick with measles, whatever, smallpox, whatever disease was brought to them from the fur traders from Europe. The Attakapaws needed protection during this time, and it was said at night when the moon was bright, there were creatures in the dark swamps in the mist. These creatures did not look like the Attakapaw. They were much taller than the natives and the Acadians. They would hear them, where some lived further down the canal than others would have livestock ripped open, the innards eaten and left behind. No one knew what they were. Not yet. Now there's two stories, as I tell you. I'm first going to tell you about the Attakapaw story, and the sad thing is that really we don't know of any Attakapaw natives, Indians, still surviving to this day. They were moved away from there and settled again in the Lafayette area in central South Louisiana, down in the salt marshes. And over the years there had been great floods, great hurricanes and stuff like that, and pretty much we believe that this tribe ultimately was wiped off the face of this earth. But some of the lore survived. So the Great River flowed out of the west of the Mississippi in Lake Verret. You could go anywhere in the world. Water could take you. The Attakapaw knew this. Newcomers wanted it. So a brother and a soldier of Napoleon went down to meet the Acadians at Assumption Church, down the bayou a bit from the Mississippi. His other brother stayed on the east side helping another group clear Acadians' new given lands. Native people just didn't understand the want to own land or how you could own it. Nature let you live on it, not own it. All the indigenous people of the area were reduced in numbers, not from the yellow fever that the mosquitoes at this time would give you, but the diseases of the newcomers coming ever closer into this untouched world of theirs. So they knew that these Acadians, and this is probably the battle before they hired the Napoleon soldier to teach them how to find them. The shaman of the tribe gathered some things, and they listened to a chant that was made to build a circle around them to protect them from the first warrior drums could beat. They knew a large group was coming. The Attakapaws had spears and like slingshots, no rocks to throw. Louisiana doesn't really have rocks, they have mud. So they used the shells to kill small prey. Their coyotes to go gather the meat to bring back to them. You know, do a slingshot, you hit a duck and they go get it. You hit a squirrel, they'll go fetch it because it's all water around you. So the day of the battle, the Acadians were going to kill the Attakapaw, not run them off like the others, because it was so evil to eat a man. They were Catholics, wanted to kill and burn the heathens. So the night as the pirogues traveled down the canal with the torches lit, the tribe had packed up all their things and silently had the elders take the women and children away in their cypress dugouts as the men and the coyotes went to fight those coming. Now, it said the great egret did not want the men to be lost to their families. But the fire things, the newcomers, would shoot out of them in their magic metal was more than they could stand up to. They had spears. So in front of them, halfway to the fire, the coyotes made a line in front of them. And they all howled at night so loud you could hear it for miles, and grew, and the bones were cracking, and they cried their coyote yips as the magic began. The Attackpaws got in their dugouts during all this noise and everything, and started to float away, following their families. The French, or the Acadians that were there, saw what they call the rougarou start running towards them, while the rest sailed away. These creatures could kill many, and their magic metal with fire did not hurt them. Many Acadians died that day. They came to know what a rougarou was. They named that canal after that, the Attackpaw Canal. And they talk about the fighters that were eaten by the Indians and ripped to shreds by the rougarou. But they also tell the story of the soldier from Napoleon who went back down there with the Acadians. And this time they fought and won and took the lands from these people that were never more seen around Lake Verret. But the rougarou and those coyotes they left behind still roam those swamps and still call out for their great protector to come and run off the strangers to the swamp. Now, moving down to Louisiana, I had a lot of trouble learning how to pronounce words because many of the words, the French root is a French word, and the way they spell it is a little strange, So I can murder pronunciations, and I apologize for that. I know I'm going to do that to this because this is based on a Mexican legend. The story it's called La Cremosa. The story, it's by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I'll get it right in a minute. It was published back in 2015, so I hope you enjoy this story. The woman is a mound of dirt and rags pushing a squeaky shopping cart. A lump that moves steadily, slowly forward as if dragged by an invisible tide. Her long, greasy hair hides her face, but Ramon feels her staring at him. He looks ahead. The best thing to do with a homeless mob littering in Vancouver is to ignore it. Give them a buck and the beggars cling to you like barnacles. Have you seen my children? The woman asks. Her voice sandpaper against his ears makes him shiver. His heart jolts as though someone had pricked it with a needle. He keeps on walking, but much faster now. It isn't until he is shoving the milk inside the fridge that he realizes that why the woman's words have upset him. She reminds him of Rona. He hasn't thought about her in years, not since he was a child living in Patero. Everyone in town had a story about Lorona. The most common tale was that she drowned her children in the river and afterwards roamed the town, searching for them at night. Her pitiful cries are warning and an omen. Camellia, Ramon's great-uncle, swore on his mother's grave that he met this ghost while riding home one night. It was a rainy season when the rivers overflowed and Camellia was forced to take a secondary, unfamiliar road. He spotted a woman in white bending over some nopals at the side of a lonely path. Her face was covered with spines of prickly pears. She had savagely bitten. She turned around and smiled. Blood dripped from her open mouth and stained her white shift. This was kind of a story the locals whispered around Protero. It was utter nonsense, especially coming from the lips of a chronic alcoholic like Camellia. But it was explosive stuff for an 8-year-old boy who stayed up late to watch black and white horror flicks on the battered TV set. However, to think about the Lorena, there is the middle of the city between the SkyTrain tracks and the pawn shop is ridiculous. Ramon never packed ghost stories in his suitcase. The Potrero and Lorena are very far away. He sees a homeless woman sitting beneath a narrow ledge, shielding herself from the rain. She weeps and hugs a plastic bag as though it were a newborn. "Have you seen my children?" she asks when he rushes by, clutching his umbrella. Nearby, a man sleeps in front of an abandoned store, an ugly old dog curled next to him, the downtown homeless picket. Ramon from the shadows as he steps over the old cigarette butts. They say this is an up-and-coming neighborhood, but each day he spots a new beggar welding an empty paper cup at his face. It is disgraceful. This is the very reason why he left Mexico. He escaped the stinky misery of his childhood in a tiny bedroom with a black and white TV set he had to share with his cousins. Behind his house, there were prickly pears and emptiness. No roads, no buildings, just a barren nothing swallowed by the purple horizon. It was easy to believe that Lorona roamed there. But not in Vancouver, which is a new and shiny, foaming with lattes and tiny condos. The dogs are howling. They scared him. Wild, stray animals that roamed the back of the houses at night. His uncle told him the dogs howled when they saw Lorena. Ramon runs to the girl's room and sneaks into his mother's bed, terrified of the noise, and his mother has to hold him in her arms until he falls asleep. He rolls in the center of the bed, staring at the ceiling. Ramon spots the woman a week later, her arms wrapped around her knees. "My children?" she asks, with her cloud of dirty hair obscuring her face. "Where are my children?" Nauseating in her madness, a disgusting sight, growing like a canker sore and invading the streets, just like the other homeless littering the area. The man in front of the drugstore that always asks him for spare change, even though Ramon never gives him any. Or the gnarled man beneath a familiar blanket, eternally sleeping in the shade of a burger joint. The city is heading to the gutter. Sure, it looks pretty from afar, with its tall glass buildings and its mountains, but below there is the depressing suit of junkies and panhandlers that mars the view. It reminds him of Protero and the bedroom with the leaky ceiling. He stared at that small yellow leak which grew to become an obscene dark patch above his bed until one day he grabbed his things and headed north. He felt like repeating his youthful impulsiveness, gathering his belongings in a duffel bag and leaving the gray skies of Vancouver. But he had the condo, which would bet a killing one day if he was patient. his job, and all the other anchors that a man pushing 40 can accumulate. A few years before, maybe. Now it seemed like a colossal waste of time. Ramon tries to comfort himself with the thought that one day, when he retires, he will move to a tropical island of pristine white beaches and blue-green seas where the wrecks of humanity can never wash ashore. He's gone to buy groceries, and there she is, picking cans out of garbage in the alley behind the supermarket. Lorona? He used to send a postcard to his mother every year when he was younger. Newly arrived in the States, he couldn't send any money because dishwashing didn't leave you with many spare dollars. And he couldn't phone often because he rented a room in a house and there were no phone jack in there. If he wanted to make a call, he had to use the payphone across the street. Instead, he sent postcards. Carmen didn't like it. His sister complained about the lack of financial support for their mother. Why did you have to take care of Mom, huh? Why is it me stuck in the house with her? She'd ask him. Don't be so melodramatic. You like living with Mom? You're off to California and never sent a goddamn cent. It ain't easy. It ain't easy here either. Ramon, you're just like all the other shitty men, just taking off and leaving the land of women behind. Who's going to take care of Mom when she gets old and sick? Who's going to clean the house and dust it then? With what freaking money? I'm doing it, Ramon. Bye, Carmen. There's some things you just can't get rid of, Ramon, his sister yelled. He didn't call after that. Soon he was heading to another city, and by the time he reached Canada, he didn't bother sending postcards. He figured he would only one day. But things got in the way, and years later he thought it would be even worse if he tried to phone. And what would they talk about now? It had been ages since he left home, and his sister and cousins that had lived in Potrero, he'd gotten rid of layers and layers of the old Ramon, molting into a new man. But maybe Carmen had been right. Maybe there's some things you can't get rid of. Certain memories, certain stories, certain fears that cling to the skin like old scars. These things follow you. Maybe ghosts can follow you too. It was a bad afternoon. Assholes at work and in the streets, and then a heavy, disgusting rain pours down, almost a sludge that swallows the sidewalks. He lost his umbrella and walks with his hands jammed inside his jacket pockets and heads down. 4 more blocks and he'll be home. That's when Ramon hears the squeal. A high-pitched noise. It's a shriek, a moan, a sound he's never heard before. What the hell is that? He turns and looks, and it's the old woman. The one he's nicknamed Lorona, pushing her shopping cart. Great. Great. There's a cart, matching each of his steps. Great. Great. A metallic chirping echoes by the low mumble. Children! 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 Squeak! 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 Metallic chant with old rhythm. He walks faster. The cart matches his pace. Wheels roll. He doubles his efforts, hurrying to across the street before the light change. The cart groans, closer than before, nipping at his heels. He thinks she is about to hit him with the damn thing, and then all of a sudden the sound stops. He looks over his shoulder. The old woman is gone. She's veered into an alley, vanishing behind a large dumpster. Ramon runs home. The dogs are howling again. A howl that is a wail. The winds roar like a demon. The rain scratches the windows, begging to be let in, and he lies under the covers, terrified. He feels his mother's arms around his body, her hands smoothing his hair like she did when he was scared. Just a little boy, terrified of phantoms that wander through the plains. His mother's hands pats his own. Mother's hand is bony, gnarled, long fingers with filthy nails, nails caked with dirt, smells of mud, putrid garbage and mold hit him hard. He looks at his mother and her hair is tangled of gray, her yellow smile paints the dark. He leaps from his bed. When he hits the floor, he realizes the room is filled with at least 3 inches of water. Have you seen my children? The thing is in the bed asks. The dog howls and he wakes up, his face buried in the pillow. He takes a cab to work. He feels safer that way. The streets are her domain. She owns the alleys. When he goes to lunch, he looks at the puddles and thinks about babies drowned in the water, corpses floating down a silver river. Don't ever let the Llorona look at you, his uncle said. Once she's seen you, she'll follow you home and haunt you to death, little boy. Oh, my children! She'll scream and drag you into the river. But he left her behind in Potrero. He thought he had left her behind. Ramon tries to recall if there's a charm, remedy against evil spirit. His uncle never mentioned one. The only cure he knew was his mother's embrace. There, little one, she said. And he nested safe against her while the river overflowed and lightning traced snakes in the sky. In the morning, there was a patch of sunlight. Ramon dares to walk a few blocks. But even without the rain, the city feels washed out. Its color has been drained. It resembles the monochromatic images they broadcasted on the cheap television set of his youth. Even though he does not bump into her, the Llorona presence lays thick over the street, pieces of darkness clinging to the walls, the dumpsters in the alleys. It even seems to spread over the people. The glassy eyes of a biner reflects the river instead of the bricks of a building. He hurries back home and locks the door. But when it rains again, water leaks into the living room, just a few little drops drifting into his apartment. He wipes the floor clean. More water seeps in like a festering boil, cut open and oozing disease. The Lorena stands guard in the alley. She is a lump in the night, looking up at his apartment window. He feels her through the concrete walls and glass, looking for him. He fishes for an old notebook with the smudge and forgotten number. The rain splashes against his building and the wind cries like a woman. The dial tone is loud against his ear. More than 10 years have passed. He has no idea what he'll say. He doesn't even understand what he wants to ask. He can't politely request to ship the ghost back to Mexico. He dials. The number has been disconnected. He thinks about Carmen and his mother and the dusty nothingness behind their house. There might not even be a house. Perhaps the night in the river swallowed them. The Lorena comes with the rain, or maybe it's the other way around. The rain comes with her. Something else also comes. Darkness. His apartment grows dimmer. He remains in pools of light away from the blackness. Outside in the alley, the Lorena scratches the dumpster with her nails. The dogs howl. Ramon shivers in his bed and thinks about his mother and how she used to drive the ghost away. She's sitting next to a heap of garbage in the middle of the alley, water pouring down her shoulders. She clutches rags and dirt and pieces of plastics against her chest, her head bowed and her face hidden behind the screen of her hair. My children! My children! She looks up at him slowly. The rain coats her face, tracing dirty rivulets along her cheeks. He expects an image out of a nightmare, blood dripping, yellow cat eyes, or worn skull. But this is an old woman. Her skin has been torn by time and her eyes are cloudy. This is an old woman. She could be his mother. She might be, for all he knows. He lost her photograph a long time ago and can't recall what she looks like anymore. His mother, who ran her fingers through his hair and hugged him until the ghosts vanished. Now he's too old for ghosts, but the ghosts still come at night. The woman looks at him, parched, forgotten, and afraid. I've lost my children, she whispers with her voice of dead leaves. The alley's a river. He goes to her, sinks into the muck, sinks into the silvery water. He embraces her and strokes his hair. She strokes his hair. The sky above is black and white, like the pictures in the old TV set. And the wind that howls in his ear is a demon wind of his childhood. This story is called Zombie by Joyce Carol Oates. My name is QP and I'm a 29-year-old, 3 months. I see my probation officer, Mr. T, Thursdays at 10 a.m. and my therapist, Dr. E, Mondays and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. My group therapy session with Dr. B is Tuesdays at 7 to 8:30 p.m. I'm a registered student at Dale County Business College, where I'm enrolled in 2 3-credit courses for the spring semester, Introduction to Accounting and Computer Graphics. My residence is 118 Church Street, Mount Vernon, Michigan, which is close by State University campus, 7 miles from Dale, but no inconvenience for me. I have my van. I drive everywhere in my Ford van. It's a 1987 model, no longer new, but reliable. My American flagged cow in the rear window. At 118 Church Street, I'm a caretaker for a rental property. The house is a tall, narrow red brick Victorian with a smudged look, like somebody had moved his thumb across it. It is 3 stories high and with an attic and a deep cellar with a stone foundation in which at the front of the date of 1892 is chiseled. Uni A is caretaker of the property. I live in the ground floor near because that is most convenient. The stairs to the cellar are close by. Nobody can get to them except by passing my door. My tools and equipment and workbench are in the cellar. But I have access to all floors, of course, because I'm the caretaker, and I'm grateful for this. My master key will open the door to any room in the house. Most of the students who rent with us are foreign students from India, China, Pakistan, Africa. Often they have trouble with their locks at first, so I am called upon to help. And I'm always obliging, though speaking no more than is necessary and making no eye contact. All the houses on Church Street are old, spacious Victorians. They used to be single-family residents. Now they're rooming houses like ours or office buildings. QP Caretaker is neatly printed on a small white card beside my door. I printed it myself in black ink. Last night I was working late in the cellar preparing seepage damage in the cistern. I'm a hard worker once I get started and lose track of time. I did not require sleep. I did not take my 10 p.m. medication. And so sometimes in the middle of the night, I climbed to the attic and looked out the window at the night sky where there was a moon so bright it hurt my eyes. Shreds of clouds being blown across the university students' rent our rooms. Last night I was working late in the cellar. Oh, I said this part already. Oops. So shameful, Dad said. But now we have going to turn over a new leaf, aren't we, son? My father is a distinguished physicist at the university. I know it has been upsetting to him to learn certain things about his only son and to have these things a matter of public record. "How does your client plead?" Judge L asked, as my lawyer said, "Your Honor, my client pleads guilty." In my heart, I did not plead guilty because I was not guilty and am not. But it was a racial matter too. The boy is black and QP is white, and what can you do? So my lawyer counseled me. But I am on good terms with the family again. This is a relief to me. I've told them how sorry I am that I've hurt them and how much it means to me that they trust me. "I will live up to your trust from now on," I told them. It is hard for me to hug them, especially Dad. There is a stiffness in all our bones, but I do it, and I believe I'm doing it correctly. Mom and big sis were crying, and there was a stinging moisture in my eyes. When Judge L pronounced 2 years, there was a long moment when my heart stopped before he added, "Suspended sentence." His eyes, which I had no choice, my lawyer counseled me, but to look at reflected severity, but also kindness. Judge L is known to my dad, and Dad is known to Judge L. Mount Vernon is not a small city, but important men know one another here as elsewhere, I believe. Afterward, Dad shook my hand so hard it hurt and did embrace me, and there were tears in his eyes and behind his glasses. Now we all going to turn over a new leaf. You get to the attic by step stairs at the rear of the 3rd floor corridor. I made my way silently in the wool socks, not wishing to wake up the young Pakistani graduate student who roomed in almost under the stairs. Ramid would not be safe specimen, or any of them beneath this roof. I never think of it. In the attic, there was a strong, sharp smell of dust and the sweetish, sour odor of dead mice. I inhaled deeply, shining my flashlight into the attic's corner. Shadows leaped like bats. When light moves, shadows leap. I'm not so comfortable in the attic as in the cellar, where I have my things. The space in the attic is like a certain dreams I had in my detention center, where shapes meant to be solid start to melt. And there's no control, unlike the cellar, which is safe underground. The attic is 4 stories above the ground, and the concentration of the cosmic rays is higher at higher elevations on Earth. The landlord made the suggestion last Sunday that I clean out the attic to reduce the fire hazard, and I will get to that soon. The cellar is my number 1 priority right now, and I will get to the attic next. Now we are going to turn a new leaf, son, aren't we? And I said, "Yes, Dad." The idea of creating a zombie for my own purposes came to me in a brainstorm about 5 years ago. Yes, at rare times you can feel an electrically charged neutrons of the prefrontal brain realigning themselves like iron filings drawn by a magnet. "The Earth is continually bombarded by high-speed cosmic rays," a voice was lecturing, an amplified voice I did not even recognize as first as Dad's. "Cosmic rays from outer space, from the distance of millions of light years, more concentrated at a higher elevation." It was a darkened lecture amphitheater at the university where I had hidden myself to hear Professor R.P. lecture to his students. Perhaps I was seeking some knowledge or some secret. I must have nodded off in the back row, and when I woke up I did not know where I was at first, which happens sometimes when I was not so much in control of myself, giving for long as 48 hours unsleeping, then crashing wherever I might be. If Dad saw me there amid his many students, he gave no sign, of course, but he could not see me, I am sure, in the darkness. On an illuminated screen at the front of the amphitheater, was a computer simulation of a section of the universe 200 million light years across, indicating how the universe evolved from its early smoothness and equitable distribution of matter to the present conditions, superclusters, galaxies, and dark matter. As much as 90% of the universe mass is unseen, black holes. Most of the universe is therefore undetectable by our instruments and may not obey the laws of physics as we know them. Professor RP's several hundred students were busy taking notes. It came to me that any one of them almost would be a suitable specimen for a zombie. Except you would want a healthy young person, male. You would want somebody with a fight and vigor in him. But the university students have always been forbidden to me after that first and only ignorant incident that, lucky for QP, turned out okay. It was dark behind the dorm, and the kid was drunk and stooped over, vomiting and gagging, and when he glanced up hearing me, the tire iron slammed down over his ear, crashing him to the ground before he could really register seeing me, so it was okay. I was wearing my hooded jacket, and there was no witnesses, yet I panicked and ran as I would never do now. But it was okay, a lesson learned. The fact is, any university student, with the possible exception of a certain of the foreign students who are so far from home, would be immediately missed. Their families care about them, and they have families. A safer specimen for a zombie would be somebody out of town, a hitchhiker or a drifter or a junkie in good condition, or from the black projects downtown, somebody nobody gives a damn for, somebody who should never have been born. I hurried straight from the amphitheater to the psych library to look up the surgical method of lobotomy. This is why, seeing the universe like that, you see how futile it is to believe that any galaxy matters, let alone any star of the galaxy or any planet of size of not even a grain of sand in all that void, let alone any continent or any nation or any state or any county or any city or any individual. The idea came to me at that time too, because I was having trouble keeping my dick hard with guys. Eyes observing me in the intimate quarters. I was living in a 2-room place on 12th Street at Reardon, which was my first real place away from my Dale Springs, and I was working for a moving company, or maybe I had just quit that time Dad dropped by. Age 24, the time to be on my own, I told them, and I meant it. The week after Labor Day 1989, Bunny Gloves had been missing 12 days. But there was never anything in Mount Vernon Gazette or on the local TV. Why would there be? Set out from Detroit to Minnesota and not a trace? Many hundred thousands in a single year, like sparrows of the air, they fly and fall and disappear without a trace. Dale Springs is where Dad and Mom and my sister Ruthie lives and where QP grew up. A suburb of Mount Vernon, 6 miles west of the university. Downtown Mount Vernon is 5 miles to the south. Yet Dad said he had dropped by to visit me. The rapping at the door, my eyes flew open, my heart beat in a cold panic because now was not the time. I called out something and was up from the bed, stumbling, pulling on my trousers, zipping up, dragging the cocky blanket up over the cot, the stained sheets, the sweat, stale smell. Okay, I said. I'm cool, okay. And it was Dad, my dad, dropped by to see how I was. The chain latch was on the door. Good thing, because when I turned the knob, there was Dr. RP in the crack, smiling, wearing a sand-colored corduroy face, with his tweed asshole of a mouth and his glistening white dentures in the crack of the door. I fumbled opening the door, Dad's eyes a few inches away. Out of the dream of Bunny Gloves and fondling, his voice as it was before and changed in it, the eyes muddy green as knowing deep in them, the pupils sank to pinpricks. Quentin, hello, am I disturbing you? Dad filled the doorway, staring breathless from the stairs, his black plastic professor glasses riding the bridge of his nose when his Professor Goatee went from brown to gray. He shaved it, but there is the shadows of the goatee on his face. Son? Asked how I was, and I said, and how was he and things at home? And Mom and Ruthie sitting there love, and eyes darting sidelong and the nostrils widening, a pause, and then asking, that smell, son, what is it? Smell? I was standing blocking Dad's view, but could not block his capacity for sniffing, smelling. I looked vague and surprised, looking about the room as if I might see the smell. Just some gym things, Dad's sweaty socks, jogging shoes, towels, and stuff like that. Dad asked, so reasonable, where is it coming from? Coming from? Under your bed? My bed? Dad made a move, but I was blocking his way. His face was beginning to go red in that way of an old man's face, blotching in patches. He said, it's more than gym things. It smells like garbage. You don't have raw garbage in here, son, do you? Distinguished professor of physics, former chair of the department, and senior fellow of the Michigan State Institute of Advanced Research. That time Dad came to get me, where I was doing homework upstairs in my room. I was 12 years old in 7th grade. He yanked me by the arm downstairs and into the garage to show me the magazines, the other stuff I had hidden behind stacks of old newspapers that he'd found. And his face splotched and furious, and at that time he did wear a goatee, and this too seemed livid with outrage. Twisting the magazines in his hands to spare himself the sight of the covers and the drawings somebody had done on them in red felt pen, and the insides with more drawings on centerfold models of males' muscled bodies and parts of certain photos scissored out. This is sick, Quentin. This is disgusting. I never want to see anything like this again. We won't tell your mother. Starting to say more, but his voice gave out. Together we burned the evidence back behind the garage where Mom would not see. He was looking at me like now, Dad's eyes behind the shiny glasses. He was 54 years old, his hairy black nostrils widening and contracting and widening like a fish's gills. How can you live in such squalor, son? It's so hard for me to comprehend. Between my bed springs and mattresses were the fishing knife and others, but I could not make a sudden move to get them. I was staring at my hands, which were trembling as if building were vibrating from the traffic. I did wonder, could I strangle Dad? But he would put up a struggle, and he is strong, and he would be so close. I was staring at my hands as if I had never seen them before, seeing the fingers were stubby and the nails uneven and broken and edged with grime. How many times I'd scrubbed my hands with soap and cleaned the nails with a knife blade, and yet it had all come back. And then the answer came to me. I bet I know what it is, Dad. A dead rat. A dead rat? Or a mouse, maybe mice. There are dead mice in here? Dad's face was contorted with disgust. I said, trying not to stammer, I know it's not the way you and Mom brought me up, Dad. I'm sorry. Quentin, how long has it been like this in the room? Not long, Dad. A day or two. Aren't you bothered by it yourself? I'm going to do some cleaning this weekend. You sleep in here in this smell, Quentin, and you're not bothered? I am bothered, Dad. I just don't get uptight about it. It's very disturbing to me, son, that you might be lying to me. Well, I don't mean to lie, Dad. I just don't know what you're asking. I'm asking if something is under your bed or in those bedclothes on the floor. Why it smells. You know what I'm asking. Apart from the mice, Dad, I said, I don't know what you're asking. It went on like that. Dad's mouth shaped certain words and my mouth shaped certain words, and it was familiar to me that there was a comfort in that. And finally he gave up, as he always has given up, and he asked, Quentin, how would you like to come home for dinner tonight? And I said, thanks, Dad, but I am not hungry, I guess. I've already eaten. Frontal lobotomy, irreversible psychosurgical procedure in which nerve fibers in the frontal lobes of the brain are severed by incision for the alleged release of mental agitation, compulsive mental, cognitive, and physical behavior in schizophrenics and other emotionally disturbed persons. This page I tore out of the textbook. I could almost see my zombie materializing before my eyes. Also from Psychosurgery, 1942, by Dr. Walter Freeman of George Washington University. When the patient is unconscious, I pinch the upper eyelid between the thumb and finger and bring it well away from the eyeball. I then insert the point of the transorbital leucotomy into the conjunctival sac, taking care not to touch the skin or lashes, and move the point around until it settles against the vault of the orbit. I then drop to one knee beside the table in order to aim the instrument parallel with the bony ridge of the nose and slightly towards the midline. Then 5 centimeters mark is reached. I pull the handle of the instrument as far laterally as the rim of the orbit will permit in the order to sever fibers at the base of the frontal lobe. I then return the instrument halfway to its previous position and drive it further to the depth of 7 centimeters from the margin of the upper eyelid. Again, the instrument as carefully as possible and take a profile photograph of it in this position. This is the nearest approach to precision of which the method can boast. Then comes the ticklish part. Arteries are within reach. Keeping the instrument in the frontal plane, I move it 15 inches to 20 inches degrees medially and about 30 degrees laterally. Return it in the mid position and withdraw by a twisting movement, at the same time exercising considerable pressure on the eyelids to prevent hemorrhage. Then to the opposite side using the identical instrument but freshly sterilized. There were several diagrams of the procedure of the transorbital lobotomy, and I ripped these out too. Mom and Dad had hoped for me to become a scientist like Dad or a doctor, but things had not turned out that way. But I knew I could perform a transorbital lobotomy even if I was in secret. Dr. Freeman stated that he did as many as 30 lobotomies a day sometimes, and often with only a humble ice pick. So why not, QP? At Tuesday's group session with Dr. B urged us to speak from the heart. There are 11 of us. Eyes are avoided. When it was my turn, my shoulders hunched up and I was staring at my shoes, which are jogging shoes, all stained and rust-colored. I said how ashamed I was to portray the loving trust of my mom and dad, not just once, but many times since my age of 16. I wish I could turn back the clock up to infancy, I said, and start time again when I was pure and good. When I was with God, I said, I believe in God, but did not think he believed in me because I was not worthy. There is a way Mom's face ceases and collapses when she cries, and my face collapsed like this, and the guys were embarrassed and look away. One of them, a cool black jock with a shaved head, passed me a tissue. I was talking fast now, like a runaway trailer truck down a mountain road. Said how sorry I was about the 10-year-old boy I had molested, but did not give such details that he was a black and retarded and natural zombie, I thought. I said I did not know what had happened, whether I had approached the boy myself in the alley back behind the dumpster where my van was parked, or whether the boy had followed me there and picked me up without my knowing it, because sometimes things happen to me I cannot understand. Too fast for me to understand. The boy had demanded money from me, or he could tell on me. He demanded $10, and when I gave him $10, he demanded $20, and when I gave him $20, he demanded $50, and when I gave him $50, he demanded $100, which was when I lost control and tried to hurt him. But I did not hurt him, I swear. By this time I was stammering and my face was wet with tears, and the guys were looking away from me. But Dr. B asked, had I known this boy for very long and had I felt affected affection for him. And I was able to speak for a while. And then I said, "Yes, doctor, that is the reason I lost control." After each of our sessions, Dr. B fills out a report for the probation office. Dr. E and Mr. T also, I'm not allowed to see these reports, which are confidential, but often I'm told things to make me hopeful. "Quentin, you are making real progress lately, aren't you? Getting in touch with your emotions, Quentin." A true zombie would be mine forever. He would obey, saying, "Yes, master," "No, master." He would kneel before me, saying, "I love you, master. There's no one but you, master." And so it would be. A true zombie could not say a thing that was not, but only a thing that was. His eyes would be open and clear, but there would be nothing inside them seeing, nothing passing judgment. Like you who observe me and who think your own secret thoughts, always and forever passing judgment. A zombie would say, "God bless you, master." He would say, yes, he would say that, but like, "Have sex with me, master, until I be blue guts." He would beg. He would be respectful at all times. He would never laugh or smirk. He would cuddle like a teddy bear. He would rest his head on my shoulder like a baby, or I would lay my head on his shoulder like a baby. We would lie beneath the covers in my bed in the caretaker's room, listening to the March wind and the bells of Music College towering, chiming. And we would count the chimes until we fell asleep at exactly the same moment. I purchased an ice pick November 1989. Cruising the van along Lake Michigan shore, I stopped by a little crossroads store, and there was no trouble. Nobody seemed suspicious. My fish gutting knife, my 12-inch stainless steel German steak knife, my Swiss Army jackknife, and others of my collection I already had. Begun my collection in 7th grade, knowing it would be put to use someday, but not when, or what use exactly. Dr. E, who is my personal therapist, said my dad is always asking, "What is the nature of your fantasies, Quentin?" And I'm blank and puzzled, blushing like in school when I could not answer a question of my teachers or even comprehend it. "I don't think I have any, what you call fantasies, doctor. I don't know." At the time of bunny gloves, raisin eyes, big guy, I did not have access to my caretaker's quarters in the cellar of 118 Church, but only my van in the 2-room place on 12th Street. The tub in the bathroom, my procedures were crude, but I was continually thwarted in my experiments. Bunny gloves, who I had such hope for, convulsed like a madman when the ice pick entered the top of his left eyeball, and screamed through the sponge gag, actually snapping the baling wire, securing his ankles. But he did not regain consciousness, dying in 12 minutes. My first zombie, a grade of F. Raisin Eyes lived for 7 hours, sometimes almost conscious, but I had to lift his eyelid of his remaining eye, I only did one, and secure it with adhesive tape. Big Guy was the most promising, for by then I had learned to use the ice pick, skillfully aiming the instrument parallel to the bony ridge of the nose, as Dr. Freeman described. Also Big Guy for the black part Indian dropout basketball player, junkie dealer from Langston, was healthy, and his bones so strong and hard, his muscles, his penis looked like a length of blood sausage. His skin a deep, rich, plum black. I loved to lick with my tongue and gnaw with my teeth, yet Big Guy disappointed me like others, for he never regained consciousness in any true sense of the word after the lobotomy, and after I removed the gag, breathed deep, shuddering, short, snoring gasps. I worried they might be heard through the walls of my room, if there was anybody to hear them. Big Guy lived approximately 15 hours, dying, I think, as I was having sex with him to discipline him as a zombie. And I only comprehended that he was dead when during the night, waking, needing to take a piss, I felt how cold he was, his arms and legs slung over me as I had arranged them already, stiffened in rigor mortis, so I feared I would be locked in his embrace. My first 3 zombies, all Fs. Yes, I did not give up hope, nor have I to this day. Mom called and left a message on the answering tape, but this time I was up to the second floor using the screwdriver to open the rusted furniture in Akhil's room. Akhil is from Calcutta, a physics graduate student, very sharp and dark skinned and must be in his mid-20s at least, but looks 15. And his English is so soft and whispery, I have to stoop to hear him. Taking care not to make eye contact. "Thank you, mister," he said. And in our mutual awkwardness, I did glance at him, and he was looking at me, his eyes liquidy brown, it glistened in them. My voice sounded American, a little forced, but I believe I said what any caretaker of a rooming house would say. "It's my job." Mom's call got screwed up with the answering tape erased, asking me would I like to come for dinner Sunday, probably. Sorry to be missing so many classes at Dale, especially since I'm determined to turn over a new leaf this time. And in intro to accounting, I screwed up the first quiz and missed the second, and since the arrest and the hearing and the suspended sentence, Dad looks at me differently. It's as if he is fearful of me, where before he was impatient and judgmental. As though Q, his only son, were a student failing a course of his. I know he is thinking, no matter the shame to the P family, and that Q is an admitted sex offender. At least Q is not in the state prison. At least his 10-year-old victim was not injured, or worse, Dad's saying. It's an investment in our joint future, son. Smiling at me with his wrinkly little pink mouth and his professor eyes narrowed inside his glasses. Mom hugs me and stands on tiptoe to kiss my cheek, and her bones are like dried sticks. I could break it in my hand. So I stand very straight and still, not breathing, to inhale her smell. What that smell is, I do not know and do not name. "You know we love you, Quentin," Mom is always saying, like a tape when a button is punched. "This time things will turn out just fine." I said, "That's right, Mom." I said, "I'm still going to see to that, Mom." Except I wake up here in the caretaker's bed at the ground floor near 118 Church Street. And I remember my computer class was the day before, or I'm driving out to Dale and it's the wrong day or the wrong time. So I will drive out anyway, since the van is in motion and heading in that direction. And I'm superstitious about changing course on impulse. And if there's a hitchhiker, I will observe him impersonally, contemplating what sort of zombie he might make. But I am not tempted. So close to home and out of college, which is this crappy fifth-rate business school everybody at the university looks down their asses at. I will park my van and stroll across campus, thinking I will visit my professors and tell them there was an illness in the family, but I can't find their offices or nobody's there. When I do, or I get sidetracked trailing some young black guys from my accounting class into the student union, where I'll have a cup of coffee and see who's around, if I recognize anybody, or if they recognize me, or even if they don't. I'm carrying my textbooks and I'm dressed okay, not with my hair in a ponytail any longer since the arrest, though I am wearing raisinized leather slouch brim hat, and bunny gloves, fur-lined gloves are in my pocket, and my $300 sheepskin jacket that my aviator-style amber prescription sunglasses are a copy of Big Guy's shades, so I look pretty cool, I think. For an ordinary white guy pushing 30, his hairline receding, and it's surprising how friendly the Dale students are, and how trusting. All of them commuters like me, living in Mount Vernon or the country. Even a girl would pull out of a chair to sit by my table if she sees friends of hers with me, or even if they are not friends exactly. "Hi," she'll say, like a high school cheerleader, like the girls in my high school who would look through QP, like he didn't exist. "You're in my computer class, aren't you?" I should mention my hand-tooled bronze leather boots, a little big for me, courtesy of Rooster, of last September. Gratiot Avenue in Detroit. I've never selected any specimen except the black boy I don't count from the Roosevelt projects in Mount Vernon or vicinity, but it's good to keep in practice by speaking with them, though mostly I listen to learn their words, their slang, the way they move their hands, their mouths, their eyes, though shrinking from their eyes, sometimes driving one of them home, going a few miles out of my way. It's no trouble, and they will remember my face and the green Ford van with the American flag decal on the back window, a big decal exactly fitting the back window. If I needed a character witness, for instance, at a trial, I think they would remember QP, if not by name, then the fact that I was kind. One time, one of them was fighting a drug, his eyes rolling sideways in his head like marbles, saying, "Hey man, I guess you don't want to do this, okay? Let me go, man." And I told him he could stay for a while. It was all right to stay for a while. And I'd pay him for his trouble. And he said he wouldn't tell anybody if I let him go. But I knew better. And I tightened the cord so his big eyes bulged and his skin was ashy plum and his lips I could not take my eyes off were ashy, and it started shooting through me like electricity. He knows. He caught on. No turning back. Which is the point that must be reached, the threshold of the black hole that sucks you in. A fraction of a second before you are free, but a fraction of a second later you are sucked into the black hole. And my dick was hard as a club, and big as a club, and the sparks of my eyes, and I did not stammer as I had them. First, he swung into the van, the cool dude eyeing with me. It was 2 barbiturates I gave him, mashed in vodka, and said, "I am not a sadist. I am not a torturer. I think you are terrific. I ask you to cooperate, and you will not be hurt." I was excited. I had to unzip. He saw and he knew. "You know, even when you don't. I will not hurt you," I said, "if you lay still." But he was struggling. He was crying. I saw he was just a kid, maybe 19 years old, jammed a sponge into his mouth so he was almost choking, and I had to be careful. I did not want to lose him. He was tired, he was drugged, he should have been anesthetized, but it was taking too long. He was in the tub naked and the water was running, and that freaked him. He knows, though he did not see the ice pick yet, which I had hidden. Snaky, supple kid with a gold filling in a front tooth, and I brought him to the apartment with a promise of home-cooked food and vodka. And he'd been thinking he'd be sucked off by Whitey and paid for his trouble and maybe clear out Whitey's possessions. But that's not how it came about. And the panic in his eyes said, I secured his head in the clamp and brought the ice pick to his right eye, lifting the eyelid, as Dr. Freeman described. And when I inserted it, he struggled, screaming through the sponge. There was a gush of blood, and I came. I lost control and came so hard. I kept coming, like a convulsion. I couldn't stop or even breathe. I was groaning and gasping for air, and when it was all over, I had control again. I saw the damage I had done. The ice pick rammed up to the hilt in his eye, up to his brain, and he was dying. He was dead. Another screw up, and no zombie. And then the disposal of the heavy weight of a downer. Must drive at the speed limit and obey all traffic regulation and must not act suspicious. A landfill or dump in the most strategic, of course, where the ground is already broken and far from how base, 50, 70, or 100 miles. The extra effort is worth it, like buying a new wig, whiskers, every time. Vacant lots, wooded areas near parks, risky because kids play in them, but empty marshlands beyond the interstate, where nobody ever goes, is a good bet. How many times I kept mementos, but no records. I memorized what required, then move on, and sometimes forgot. But now I have the basement of this old house. A little sickness in the air from so much fragrance everywhere somebody left behind. New anthology of English verse, a leaf through. it in the studio and read these lines, and something sprang in me like bells of the music college. Because now it is spring, it is April, and my first year of probation is behind me. At the house at 118 Church Street, built in 1892, crumbling stone foundation. The cellar was renovated in the 1950s, so there was two sections, the new and the old. The new was poured concrete floors and reinforced walls with beaver board paneling. Gas furnaces here, water heater, fuse box, caretaker's workbench, and such tools as my electric power drill and Cherokee chainsaw. The old section of the cellar is never used. It's a hard packed earth floor. The ceiling rafters are low, the filthy with cobwebs and walls rotted, the dry stone cistern used for decades, a strong smell of drains, that some seepage in the rainy months, but I have installed a second pump to get back there. You move on your haunches slowly. You need a good flashlight. You need what cannot be broken. The sister had almost been converted and will be ready for use soon. And if a zombie is a failure, there is a remainder of the cellar for safe disposal in the earth. And there is a new door replacing the old rotted door. And last week I purchased a steel padlock from Sears for extra security. I was allowed to plead guilty to sexual misdemeanor committed against a minor. The lawyer Dad hired for me and the prosecution lawyer worked it out. And the Judge L was understanding. Where money changes hand, and it was a word of an inexperienced white man, unmarried, 29 years old, against the word of a black boy from the project. And this black boy, 10 years old, is from a dysfunctional family. There's no problem knowing where justice lies. And QP was repentant. He was ashamed, and he had learned his lesson. One look at him, he knew. 2 years suspended sentence, psychotherapy, counseling, regular reporting to a probation officer. Mr. T agreed. Leaving Judge L's chambers, I was shaky. I was wiping my face, and Dad was gripping me by the elbow. "Buck up, son," quote, unquote. "Everything is fine, son." And outside, Mom and Ruthie and Reverend Eckhorn, who's his mom's friend and who vouched for me to the authorities, were waiting. And I was wearing a new suit of brown checks, and I was wearing a beige bow tie. My hair had been cut, trimmed neat at the ears and the nape of the neck. And I was not crying now, but smiling and hugging my family. And I was shaking Reverend Eckhorn's hands, saying, thank you, I am so happy, so grateful. Thank you for your faith in me." A warm rain speckled my face. Dad handed me the car keys with a request for me to drive, and I understood it was to show how he trusted me. The family trusted me, and I would not let them down ever again, driving out of the city of Dale Springs, where the houses were set on large lots, and the streets and tree line. I felt such a sense of homecoming and being loved, and I kept well within the speed limit, not minding when other drivers honked their horns and passed me impatiently. Ruthie, who is my big sis even now, aged 35, and principal of a high school looking after her kid brother, said, "Quinn was always the one of us who could drive a car." Then adding quick, "is right, Quinn." I grinned into the rearview mirror. "Right, Ruthie." Driving home a warm, rainy, windy day, Dad beside me in the passenger seat, stroking his chin where the goatee had been, and Mom and Ruthie in the back. I could almost not remember why I was so happy and feeling so free. Thinks of black cop, shy, shrinking boy, cop, like a baby rabbit, skin. I held it in my hand, tickling the tip with the tip of the ice pick. The pills had taken effect yet, and the boy panicked, beginning to bellow even before he broke free and crashed through the locked rear door of the van. So help me God, I don't know how. And running, calling out for help, bellowing like a fire alarm, rising louder and louder. "My zombie!" He had not asked for a nickel, really. He was trusting his dog, yet I could not trust him. They were asking me something and I was listening, but I must have answered okay. Dad laid his hands on my shoulder for the first time driving that day. I believe I could feel the motion of the earth rushing through the emptiness of space and spinning on its axis. But you don't feel it, for to feel it is to be scared and happy at once, and to know that nothing matters but that you do what you do, and what you do you are. And I felt it, and I knew I was moving into the future. There is no past anybody can get to alter things or even to know for sure what they were. But there is definitely a future. We are already in it. There you go. 3 stories for the full moon. Super full hunter's moon. Because like this is the time when you go hunting and pack up your freezers for the winter time, right? I'll see you in November with indigenous peoples. I will be telling you stories of different tribes throughout the Americas. I hope you do tune in. So, good night and enjoy the full moon. Huh?